Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, and a good morning to you all. I have to tell you, I feel absolutely so different than I normally do as I start the show, because today I know that I'm not wading into stuff that upsets me. The usual news fodder that I deal with. Today I have a guest, and she has put together a book that I found just fascinating. And I want to share her experience, her book, with you. And it's going to get us into all kinds of conversations. Anyway, let's just get it going. I'm so relieved to talk about something wonderful instead of something horrible. Jennifer Adams, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Lynn. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you. Now, I remember you warning me when you, sent me information about the book that the title of it is not one you would normally pick up. I mean, I don't even know how to even, I can't even pronounce the title of the book. I mean,
well, you are not alone. You are not alone in that. That is not the first time I heard it. And in fact, I had hoped to call the book what the publisher is calling Finding Our Perfect Moon, yes, which is a reference to the letters. But it's published through an academic publisher, and it's in a series about autoethnography. And so the book is called An Autoethnography of Letter Writing and Relationships Through Time. An autoethnography is really just a memoir that's maybe a little more reflective and tries to draw in some theory. But it's a terribly wonky title.
I know. I get, God almighty, I don't know why the Academy has always got to be so. I mean, it's almost as if I have a brother who's an academic, and his books would have so much of a wider audience if he would just tone down all that, the academic-y stuff. Anyway,
yes,
you did. I mean, it is, and your academic stuff is totally accessible to a non-academic. Let's just start from the beginning, because you had an experience. You found something that somebody else had left behind. And this is the book is the result many, many, many years later. Why don't you just tell the story?
Sure. Great. Well, so I'm originally from the Pittsburgh area, and in 1998, I moved to Lafayette, Indiana, to attend Purdue University to get my graduate degree. And I like old houses, and so I was looking for a space in an old home to rent. But I also had some storage needs, and so I was looking for some place that had extra storage. I was lucky to find a place in a historic district, and it was a lovely apartment. But when I got there, the landlord had not cleared out all of the garbage that was upstairs from previous tenants. And so we made a deal. He cut me a little percentage off of the rent for the first month, and I cleaned out the attic. Well, way in the back of the attic, I found an old chest that was obviously much older than the rest of the junk that had been up there. And so I'm a curious person about old stuff by nature, and I started sorting through it and pretty quickly realized there were letters, about 400 letters, in addition to some other kinds of school memorabilia, notebooks, coursework, this kind of stuff. So I didn't have the heart to throw it away. And I initially thought if this were my grandma's stuff, I would want to have it. And so my intention was to try to figure out who this originally belonged to. pretty quickly I discovered, and of course I was reading some of these letters.
Of course.
I conducted my research. It's hard to resist.
Yeah.
And I really recognized right away that the letters were written in a style that I found completely eloquent. My background was in English literature from Duquesne, and I have an appreciation for style. And I was just really surprised at how eloquent I thought the letters were. And so I did some research, and I found out pretty quickly that both of the letter writers had died. And I was able to do a little more research. And again, this is 1998, and the internet was, pretty primitive.
Yeah, right. So you didn't have the easy kind of detective work that we now assume.
Exactly. Yeah. The truth of the matter is if the internet had been as advanced as it is today, there would be no story, really. I would have found, it would have.
Well, that's right.
Descendants, and it wouldn't have happened. But I wasn't able to really. I found a niece who I called, and she was pleasant enough, but sort of dismissive. She said there had been a rift in the family, and that she knew that they were dead, but that nobody really wanted the letters. And so at that point, I decided, I was falling in love with them at this point. And so I took them to a professor in my department. I was in the Department of Communication, who studied relationships, and he agreed to work with me. And so I wrote my dissertation about them. And then I packed them away for 15 years. I did share them with a group of students. I was teaching a first-year seminar course on love letters, journals, and diaries. And so as I got closer with these students, I felt more comfortable sharing the letters. Lynn, you read the letters. They're very intimate. And so I felt really uncomfortable for a long time without any permission. You know what I mean? Like just broadcasting them. But these students, young people, they have enthusiasm and energy and said, you have to continue to pursue this. Someone inherited that estate. Someone can give you this permission. And to make a long story short, Ancestry.com provided all the answers in about 3 seconds. And it turned out that they had a daughter who was still surviving. I was able to contact her, return the letters to her, and she gave me permission to publish them in this book.
That's I know, but if you stop and think, because you said if the internet as it exists today, none of this you would not have done the deep dive you did. You would not have. I would never have had the pleasure, nor your students of seeing this. There's something about the quickness that the internet and our current life affords us, which speed is something that we value, knowing first, immediately, same day delivery, all that stuff. It is now it's a value. And back when these letters were written, whoa, everything was so much slower. And even going to 98, when you first tried to start your quest, it was still slower, and the slowness allows for more thoughtfulness, for more discovery, for the speed with which we live. The fact that nobody writes letters anymore. I mean, this book you wrote brought so many things into my head about what we have lost, and what you by finding these have reminded us of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I actually call letters slow communication now, and I'm an advocate for it. It's a way that even if you love technology, that you can step back and think clearly and more thoughtfully about what you want to say, and the opportunity for revision exists in letters in ways that it
imagine.
Yeah. Right.
It's not just pushing a button and bang, something goes off. I mean, you have to there's more thoughtfulness. That's what's missing.
Yes, absolutely. And in one of the letters, I even think about how little mentioned that she was a little irritated about something Harry had done, and she wrote a big long letter. And she intended to send it, but in the morning she decided against it and rewrote this letter. Right. You know, so I think that opportunity. How often do we hit send and then the next morning we're like, I had it. Yeah.
So you've just mentioned we've been remiss. The two people whose letters form the core of this wonderful book are Lillian and Harold. Both were students at Purdue, and the years the letters are written in are what, 1931 to 33?
33. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
And when they start writing, the reason they're writing is he in the summers goes home. His parents live in New York State. And she, though, lives in Lafayette.
That's right. So she lives in Lafayette, and she's in her parents' home.
Yes, and in her parents' home. And so it's in the summer that these letters between these lovesick young people are crossing paths back and forth. And
that's right.
I just... I mean, in some respects, after a while, you think, all right, already, sweetie bums and this and that. And, you know, I mean, just the love and stuff. You see that. But then things get, there's other stuff that makes its way into the letters. And what was fascinating to me is that this is when the Depression is in full force. Yes. This is when prohibition is in force. Yes. And I have to tell you, other than a few things, which we'll talk about, those two huge events don't really seem to, make themselves felt with these two people in love.
Absolutely. And so both families were affluent, but both were involved in retail operations that had to be impacted, by the economic circumstances of the time. But they, with one drastic exception, they don't really mention the Great Depression.
Yeah, and their drink. I mean, they talk about going, there's places where they go to drink. They don't say it. And I was thinking, what? Wait, what? So, I mean, it's a different picture of what you imagine prohibition was. I mean, people wanted alcohol. There was alcohol.
Well, evidently, they mentioned going to what they call a roadhouse on the outskirts of Chicago regularly, where they would listen to an orchestra and drink. And so it didn't seem shocking at all to them that it was illegal. So it is an insight, I think, into maybe how younger people or college students at that time thought of the prohibition or didn't think of the prohibition.
No, I have to tell you, back in my day, we were breaking the law left and right with drugs.
Right, exactly.
So, I guess it's no different in that respect. There's so many things here. First of all, can your students even read these letters themselves? If they're not transcribed by you. I understand that young people now find cursive almost like, looking at Sanskrit.
Yes, that's true. So I've found that many students, and I have very traditional age college students, so they're almost all, fresh out of high school. And they tell me they have not learned, script or cursive handwriting. Right. And they struggle to read it, right? So I will project it on the screen, but I do have to transcribe it for them.
Well, I have to tell you that,
but it seems like Old English to them.
I'm sorry, it's such a loss. I have boxes. I cannot be the only one. I have boxes of letters. I have always saved letters. I have letters. I don't even know how I have some of them because I have letters I wrote and somehow managed to get back. Many to family. I have letters from camp. I have letters my brother wrote from camp. I have letters from, all of these letters. And that I once found a trove up in our attic of love letters between my parents during World War II.
Oh,
and I was just, I know, you just go insane. Who doesn't understand the value of that? And the fact that niece you first encountered said, I was thinking that I bet that would be the reaction of an awful lot of people. Oh, God, it's great.
Yes, absolutely. And really, it's one of the things that I lament, and encourage people to write letters because, so the box of letters that you found from your parents, you learn new information about your own past. When you look at letters that you wrote from camp, that brings your past self back to you. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's amazing the way that is retained in those letters. Yes, and that it makes me very sad people don't have them, or that they won't have them in the future. Because I don't think email.
Emails. They say obviously that email stuff. It's there on the internet. It's there forever.
Right.
But it's not the same.
No.
It's not the same.
And I honestly can't imagine. Right. And I can't imagine anyone finding any joy in finding an old trove of emails and having to go through them in the same way that I found that nifty old box.
Why isn't that interesting though? I agree with you, but I wonder, I've been talking to people about this book. And a friend of mine sent me, oh my God, what she's got. She sent me two things, and I want to share them with you. What a trove. I'm dying to go over and just look and look and look. She has things like a bill of sale. Here it is, that her great grandfather had. It's from a company that its letterhead says at the foot of Laurel Street. That's the address, the foot of Laurel Street. And it sells high-grade pianos and organs and leading makers of sewing machines. And the receipt is for a Norwood sewing machine. For $16.50, which I think is a lot in 1899.
Wow.
1899. And the script, again, even the letter writing, the script of that is so beautiful. And then there's this awful thing, postmark, the envelope, just like your letters in this. And it's from 1923. And the handwriting is incredibly beautiful, but it's written by like a creepy stalker. To her grandmother. And her grandmother saved it. Her grandmother had won a beauty contest. And this creep sends her a letter, and he barely had her address. He simply had a name misspelled, and that she lived in Millville, New Jersey, and it got to her. And the letter just says, "May our small but true and sweet acquaintance ripen into real friendship. Yours awaitingly, James Barbetti. P.S. Remember me?"
It is creepy.
Isn't it creepy?
Oh, it is creepy. And how interesting that you could be stalked in the mail.
You can be stalked in the mail, and that was 100 years ago. All those creeps are still out there. But I just, oh my God. So you really had, and you made mention of it when you were sort of setting the stage, telling the story of the discovery. How you sat with these letters, you read them, then you started obsessing a little bit. You put them in chronological order, back and forth, and you really, they start coming to life. These two. Yeah. Were there ever any photographs that you found in the box, so you knew what they looked like?
No, there were no photographs. There were mentions of photographs that had been sent, but they must have been taken out and kept in other places. So the first photograph I saw of Lillian was the yearbook photo. I looked up. I went to the library and found a yearbook photo. So it wasn't until I met their daughter that I was able to go through scrapbooks from the time they were writing.
Right. But otherwise, you could just in your own, you had to imagine them.
Exactly.
But your concern, even as you mentioned, teaching the first class you did of using the letters, that you were invading perhaps their privacy. A concept, by the way, that your students wouldn't even understand.
I know. It's much less of a concern for younger people.
They don't even know what do you mean? I was talking about this to somebody the other day. There's no conception of privacy. Right. When people are sexting each other, I'm sorry, there's nothing that's not considered public anymore. Privacy is quaint. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're even comfortable with surveillance, when there's a concern on campus right away. They're like, there should be cameras right in our dorms. And I'm like, right in your dorms? That's terrible. But they feel it makes them safe. And it makes you feel, very uncomfortable.
Observed, right. It's just, and that is such a huge change. And it doesn't bode well as we move toward a lot more people thinking authoritarianism is a good idea.
Exactly. All's well and good if everything's
but right. Yeah. So you're concerned about the privacy, but you went into a whole thing where you got a little academic, but I found it really interesting about what act were you engaging in by reading these letters? Were you engaging in voyeurism? Were you like a peeping Tom, an eavesdropper? And, the fact that you had that question and that concern that there was an ethical issue here speaks well of you. I don't know that all people would necessarily have had those concerns, but you did. And tell how you eventually even after, so the daughter eventually gives you the okay, but you, even before she did, I think, thought that there was another way of looking at it. And the two words I'm remembering are that you said it is also, the reading of these letters is also bearing witness.
Yes. Yeah. And I think there is a contrast. And sometimes, sometimes you do feel voyeuristic reading their letters. There's one letter in which she talks about that she wishes she could be in her pajamas and lay her head on his knees and listen to an orchestra, and it's sort of, it's very intimate for 1932.
I know.
And so there were moments of discomfort for sure in reading that. On the other hand, I study dialogue, and I believe really strongly in the value and the importance of our everyday lives. And for these two individuals who were no longer with us, they had lived their lives, and they do get married and, die within 6 months of one another. And so it's sort of this, very traditional kind of love story. But at the same time, if we didn't have their letters to celebrate that love, they would be no one. You know what I mean? And so, so there's an important part bearing witness, and seeing others' experiences, and then knowing their whole story. And then, so I think there's also an educational component to that as well. You know,
well, there's a, you know,
is what I hope.
Someone knows as long as someone is there to speak your name or to read your letters, you are not wrong.
Exactly.
So you have resurrected them and put them back out into the living world. And I want to talk more about the two of them. Because first of all, one thing we haven't mentioned is these two turned out to be Jewish. Now, are you Jewish? You're not Jewish.
I am not. No.
Okay. I am. And I have to say that for me, that was a whole element of this that was just fascinating because it their lives dovetailed with my family's life, so that their parents were like my grandparents, and they were the children of immigrants.
Right. Yes.
And what's mind blowing to me is that their immigrant parents had both managed to become successful owners of businesses, which is what happened with my grandfather, who started as a peddler and ended up with a furniture store. And then his children went to college, and these two. And then, and it's this story of a very rapid entry into the promise of America that just blows me away.
Absolutely. It's so incredible to think of their parents. Through genealogical research, I was able to find a bit about both of their sets of parents. And as you say, they're both immigrants. Lillian's mom doesn't have a high school degree. You know what I mean? And yet here in Lafayette, they ran a delicatessen. For a while, they lived on top of it, but eventually moved to a pretty affluent neighborhood. You know, it was a house they could divide 6 times in 1998 for apartments. And so they did very well.
So that's the house that you had the apartment in?
Yeah. Okay. Their house that they built.
Her parents built that house, and that's where the letters were. Okay.
Yeah, they stayed there all those years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Harry's family was in New York, and they ran a egg and dairy import business, and were very, very successful.
Now they seem very they were much wealthier. I would say she was. My family's more akin to her family than his with their wealth. But so these are two first generation Jewish college students. The other astonishing thing is that she was a woman.
Yes.
How many women went to college? And not a lot did, right?
No. So looking at the yearbook, she was a little bit, she wasn't older than him, but she was a little further along in school because Harry had a weird situation where his family sent him to Canada for a number of years.
I know, it is so bizarre.
Which is strange. And so he's a few years behind in school. She graduates in 1931. I would say there were 30 women graduating at that time, of about 1,000 students. You know, it was a
in Purdue. This is Purdue, 31.
This is Purdue. Yeah, so it's still
30 out of 1,000. And how many of those 30 were Jews?
I think just her. Yeah, there was a very small majority, or a very small minority of Jewish students at Purdue. Still are. So this I would imagine.
Yeah. So Jews were like, I imagine, less than 1% of the student body. So this is how these two would have come together. If you're a Jew, Jews find themselves together because they're other.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, Lillian went to college for a year at Miami University in Ohio, and didn't do very well. And she had a buddy that was sending her letters trying to convince her to come to Purdue. And he makes that argument. He says, there's so few Jewish women here that you're bound to meet someone.
That's right. Hey, man, and there's not a lot of Jewish men, but there's more than there are Jewish women.
Exactly.
Right.
And of course, the bias against her in Indiana comes out in the letters when she talks about going on an interview. She wants to be a school teacher. All the women at Purdue in 1931 had home economics degrees. That was a degree. You got a degree in home that was
economics.
The degree.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. You learn to be a better mother and a wife.
Right, exactly. But she could get a school license, and so she went to an interview locally, and she was qualified. And the superintendent basically told her, "You're qualified, but you're Jewish, and so we can't hire you." And she writes this letter where she says, her blood is boiling, and
she was furious.
And she was furious, and it's. The same thing continues to happen to people, but no one says to you, "I can't hire you because you're Jewish."
No, the same thing still happens. Now people keep their mouths shut.
Exactly.
He was very. He literally said, "You're qualified," but he said they won't accept the community.
Oh yeah, right. They won't. The community.
They won't.
That's
they
exactly
will not accept you. He didn't want the trouble. Yeah.
Right.
Can't happen. So I got the impression she never got to teach. She never found it.
So their daughter believed that she didn't. Perhaps she worked as a substitute teacher for a year when they were living on the West Coast, but no, she mostly was a housewife, is what Barbara said.
Yeah. And it's what she was intended to do.
Right.
So I found her the more mature of the two.
Yes.
The more take charge of the two. The more I had to laugh toward the end when you finally meet the daughter, and you mentioned that you said something about her seemingly being in control. If anyone was running the ship, it was her.
Yes.
And the daughter laughed. Right.
Yes. Yep. And she said, "That's her mom." Yep. And she thought, "Oh, here she is, always writing my dad." She would always tell him what to do.
Though. There was a level of sort of immaturity or irresponsibility or privileged little rich kid thing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Even the year that he takes the internship at a pharmacy, he writes and complains about how hard it is to work all day long.
Right.
But then, of course, as a grown man, he went off and did very well for it. So he grows up.
Yes, of course.
But Lillian probably, helped point him in the right direction, as you said.
No, I have little doubt of that. He definitely needed a strong woman, and he found one.
Yes.
But okay, so that he's working as an intern in a pharmacy in New York City. And what's bizarre is the guy who owns the pharmacy leaves him in charge. And this is in the day when a pharmacist put medicines together.
Yes.
I forget what you call that. What do you call that when you're actually compounding?
Like a compound, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're making the stuff. So he leaves Harry to do this stuff for the unsuspecting customers. He doesn't know. He's just a student.
Right.
And he says at one point in the letter that he made some potion up for some woman for a skin disorder or something. And she came back a few days later and said, "That was wonderful. I want more." And he thought, uh-oh, I don't have a clue what I did.
Right, which is, it's comedy, but it's also terrible.
I know. I'm sure it was against the law. Yeah, it was against the law.
And I'm sure the laws weren't as advanced. But I do get a kick out of those stories. He even says, my boss is a very lazy man. And one time he says, and just leaves him there. But of course, that ends up in the situation where he's, the boss is there the day that the.
Well, let me read it. Let me read.
Okay. Yeah, yes.
This is July. This is in the letter, July 7, 1932. Dearest darling. He first starts by, as he starts most letters, apologizing to Lillian about not writing sooner. He mostly just apologizes to her throughout the entire book. But then the second paragraph, after he apologizes, he says, "Gee, honey, I had one of the most horrible experiences of my life last night. A man who'd been out of work for a few months decided to end it by jumping out of a 6-story window. Well, the first place to take him was into the drugstore. While waiting for the ambulance, my boss was working on him while I was holding him. The poor fellow died while I was holding him. The sight of all that blood and agony just made me sick all over. I get chills every time I think of it. I was perfectly calm while he was there, but as soon as they took him out, it left me in a terrible mood." So there's the depression. And that's the first time it makes its entry into their world that we're aware of.
What me. Yeah.
What?
I was just going to say, teaching 20-year-old men every day. Mm-hmm. It strikes me what that must have felt like for him.
Yeah.
At that age.
And I also have to say, I'm so confused because that is such a big thing. And the next letter that you have in here that she writes is a complaint about him not writing again and doesn't say anything about him cradling a dying man who jumped out of a window. What?
Right. So this is one of the moments, I've often said in conversation, and I write a little bit about this in the book, that as I worked with these people, of course, I developed a relationship. I really respected them. I loved them. But there were moments that they make me angry, right? And this is one of them. So I do acknowledge that maybe that letter was removed for some reason. You know what I mean? Maybe we don't have access to it. However, all the other letters are there. And so I kind of believe he didn't respond to it. And you're right. That next letter that she writes is chastising.
It's just in terms, you don't like her in that. You're like, what the hell, lady? But here's the thing again. What you mentioned, how young they are, how they're so. All they can see is their love and separation, and people dropping out of buildings, I guess, doesn't even come close to the hurt she's feeling because he didn't write. The sort of self-centeredness of a young, besotted person. That's the way I decided to forgive her.
Yes, I think so. And she also responds with her own letter just a few letters later about their
I'm going to do that one.
You're going to do that one too? Okay.
Hang on.
Okay.
This is again. This is July 19, 1932. I just wonder where to. So she again talks about it's hell having you gone. I want you so. Blah, blah, blah. It's 102 in the shade. I can't sleep. Blah, blah, blah. And then she says, I I placed a cot on my back porch where I can get a cooler breeze once in a while, and where I can gaze up at the moon, the stars, into the trees, and think of you lying under God's own heaven as I do. I feel very close to you, your words, not in a physical sense, but in a mental sense. Your actions, your words, and your letters come to me very clearly, and I realize just how much you mean to me. Now, here's again the thing about these letters that just drives you berserk. Okay, so there's that. The very next sentence, it's a new paragraph, says, Wilma tried the abortion herself and almost wrote finiti for herself in doing it. Finally, the doctor had to finish it or let her die. Now, Wilma is a woman who works as a maid, I guess, in their, is that where she works as a maid in their home?
Yeah, in their home. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then she says, yes, I know it's illegal, but they will operate if the victim's life is in danger. Not necessarily anymore.
That's true. That's true. Depends on the state.
No, not necessarily anymore 100 years later. Okay.
Wow.
She's back to telling him. She says she begged to, this just breaks my heart. She begged to be allowed to come back to work, but of course was refused. Gee, she says, I felt so sorry for her. She has no home and no one to care about what becomes of her. That must be about the worst thing that could happen to a human being. Surely we are to be thankful for our parents, relatives, and sweethearts. It's the most wonderful sensation in the world to know someone wants to know how you are, what you're doing, if you are happy, blah, blah, blah. Don't you feel the same? As to my vacation, so far, okay, so.
I know, right?
It's the insertion. I mean, so there is this understanding and empathy for this poor woman who there is no doubt, of course, she was refused she lost her job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am so, I have to tell you, of all the things in this book, I'd like to know what happened to that poor woman.
I know. And, it
was a depression. It was a depression. There wasn't any work.
Exactly. There was no,
and what's with her family? I guess, my understanding, I'm sorry. This is how I
No.
your book. My sense is that immigrants who have built themselves up into respectable business people, but they are also a member of a minority group, Jews.
Right.
They want very much to assimilate into the world in the country. They want to abide by all the strictures. And I guess that would have doomed this woman for them to have perhaps followed their hearts, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
And I just can't, I think, it would have been something people would have talked about,
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
I don't know. It's the only, again, I'm trying to figure it out.
Yes. I assume, that, as you say, and we know that there was discrimination against them. They're operating a store, you know what I mean, where they want people to come and shop at their store. And abortion, then again, perhaps as much as now, has a stigma associated to it, and they didn't want that stigma to rub off on them, perhaps their own moral judgments and, their own daughter, who knows? But it's terrible. And it's also, she is sort of flip. I mean, she does have empathy, but she also, again, shits right away to the vacation, like you said.
Right. I mean, so there's this self-centeredness. And he never, by the way, responds to
Nope, he doesn't respond to that one either. No. Yeah. So, which is why the letters aren't satisfying like a novel is. And I mean, I often said that they're real, and so sometimes they're kind of disappointing. You wish there was more or different thing. Yeah.
But I was also, I mean, the other thing that first of all, she seemed to be a woman well ahead of this sense of women being, sort of submissive, obviously, because she's so strong. She's like, obviously, as I said, she seems to be the one who's ruling the roost. But also,
how about the story? She drives in 1931.
That's what I wanted. That's
Auburn.
Where I was heading.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
She's driving all over Kingdom Come. I don't think of women, a 19, 20-year-old, woman.
Yeah, she drives from Lafayette to New York City, practically. Mount Vernon is right above Queens.
By herself. Right.
By herself. It's fascinating. Well, that she had a car was fascinating to me.
Yes, that she had a car, that she did that. I mean, whoa. This is no shrinking violet. This is a woman who, when she wanted something, got it.
Yeah,
except for that teaching job. Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately.
So what, so when you're reading the letters, after the letters, you couldn't even know that they had in fact married.
Right. They just end. So I had no idea.
And it was quite clear that his family, and she knew it, his highfalutin family looked down at her more pedestrian, roots.
Yeah.
So even immigrants, there are two immigrant Jewish families. One, a little more success, a little more money. And then this is people are just so, I don't know. I don't think they don't change. They just don't change. It's always been thus. Doesn't speak well of them. There was no reason for them not to like her.
Right.
Except that she was somewhat the wrong status, I guess.
Yes. A Midwesterner. And a Midwesterner
too.
Yeah, that's Midwesterner was a problem, yeah.
Was it really? Oh, God. See, I was a Midwestern Jew. Oh, man. Well, screw those. You know what? It's funny. It reminds me of my Uncle Louie, who, took off to Florida at one point, and he complained about the element, he said here. The element, he would say with disdain. And what he meant by the element were the New York Jews. The New York Jews. So, I mean, because I guess they looked down on he felt they looked down.
I guess so, yeah.
It's too funny. It is funny.
It is.
God. Another big thing is the music. Played such a, if you think kids, it has ever been thus, that this is the time in our lives, the music of this period in all of our lives is the music that stays with us.
Yes.
It helps form us. And they were as into the music of their day as any of us ever were.
Absolutely. They're quoting Irving Berlin songs in their letters. They are connecting, the sort of intertextuality of what the lyrics say and how their feelings align with that. There's songs throughout, especially their early letters. And for someone reading from, 2023, it brings up a lot of nostalgia. There are a lot of the big band, George Gershwin tunes and, things that we don't listen to that much anymore. But that was pop music then. And so there it was. I was it even shocked me. I was about 30 when I started doing this work, and I was like, wow, look, they care about music in the same way, that we would make a mixtape in the 80s for someone we were dating.
That's right.
So very similar. Yeah. Again, the more things change, it's often really surprising to look at the past and see how similar they are.
It's just people are people. People are the same, and they struggle with the same stuff. And they disappoint you in the same way. But you also saw how important the U.S. Postal Service was.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Stop and think if that is, a phone call. A phone call was, even for these families that had money, was something you didn't do, unthinkingly.
Right. They do mention they had phones, but rarely use them.
Right. And I was even thinking back of when I was in college in the 60s. My family would only, my parents would call on Sunday, one call a week. That's all. Other than that, there was no, unless there were letters. And I do have some letters from that period, because I'm telling you guys, it was a better way to live.
Yeah.
Not being able to necessarily be, talk constantly to each other, or now we don't even talk. We just text back and forth to each other. And I'm even wondering, so people won't know how to write a letter. I'm even wondering if they'll know how to have a conversation.
Well, you do see some research coming out that communication anxiety is a growing fear for young folks, especially coming out of COVID. They didn't have as many opportunities to speak. And so, I think there is. I do think just communication, having a phone call makes them incredibly anxious. Which is hard to imagine. A lot of times I think people who are older like us are like, it's so much easier to call. I'm just going to call, than text this all out. But things change dramatically.
No, I've gone over to the other side. I consider the phone ringing an intrusion. And I think,
that's true too. That's true too. I know.
If I call, I usually text before and say, is it a good time to call?
I do the same thing, yes.
Do you? I mean,
yes. I do that, yeah.
So back in those days, I guess you would either have to go in person, or you would have, you would write a letter or send a telegram, which is another way that people were communicating.
Yeah. And there's some neat telegrams that they send back and forth. And I see our time is running short, so I don't want to belabor it. But at the beginning, like the very first exchange that exists is actually between Harry's parents and friends, because he's hitchhiking across the United States in 1931. And everyone's using telegrams to try to figure out where he is.
So this is him being an unthinking son.
Yeah,
he does it. His parents are expecting him, and he's got his thumb out. He's stuck in Pittsburgh at one point.
Yes, isn't that funny? I laughed.
Right. Yeah. Too bad. He's stuck in Pittsburgh, and he can't. But he doesn't communicate. I guess he feels, what's he supposed to do? I don't know. So there's these frantic, where is he? And, it could be that it was that first, as far as it isn't the first time that his family is aware of her. And I would think, is it?
Right.
But it might be an unwelcome, when they think of her, they think of, that's the girl, and that's the family.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's not a great way to start.
No.
But it's funny. Like as I said, when I was young and I found it, I was like, wow, this kid has so much pluck. And then 20 years later, when I was writing about it, I was like, how horrible. No, what these poor people, so age really changes the perspective on it.
It does. So, the book is out. The book is out. And if anyone is interested, I mean, how do they find it? Because they're going to have to.
Right. So it's on Amazon. It's available through the publisher. So just searching my name isn't that helpful because there's about a gazillion Jennifer Adams. But that being said, an autoethnography of letter writing and relationships through time. But the easier thing to remember is the subtitle, which is Finding Our Perfect Moon. So if you put that into an Amazon search, it'll come up.
Okay, Finding Our Perfect Moon. Oh man, it's made me you can tell. I mean, I just started. My head went in a million different directions, and of all the things, as I'm an old woman, and as I near my end, and I look at all the accumulation and detritus of my existence. Mm-hmm. As I start I'm in a, throw things out mode. I don't want to leave one of those jam-packed houses for my poor kid. So,
right.
Yeah, so I just don't want stuff. But the one thing that is precious to me are these things like letters and pictures. And then I think they're precious to you. But not, what are we to do with all of this stuff if we have family members that don't care? Is there any archive that just wants to take in stuff from regular people?
So they will. So we've, Barbara, their daughter, didn't survive to see the book get published, but her brother-in-law held on to the letters, and he's donating them to Purdue since they were students there. Mm-hmm. So many universities keep archive. Lynn, for you, because you were such a notable person in Pittsburgh, I'm sure one of the universities or your own alma mater would enjoy having that information.
Well, I do have that. Yeah, the University of Pittsburgh has all my television work and as much radio as I can find, and I haven't given them all the letters and scrap and the paper stuff because I want it as long as I can have it. But yes, I do have a place for mine, so mine will be archived at the University of Pittsburgh. But I'm thinking for somebody who wasn't on TV or something, it's hard. But it is possible to go to your right.
Start in your local community with your community library and see if they have an archive. And then, maybe you need to go to a bigger city. But I do believe that archival librarians recognize that there's an end to these objects. And they often have the space to be able to store them for the future. And so I know my university even has letters from former students who've passed away, who have really I don't want to say major significance in the world. They were significant.
No, but they weren't celebrities.
They weren't famous.
Or something. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Fame. Right.
Yeah. So don't throw them away, please.
Well, I was I have a nephew who is an archivist, and he's the one who said to me years ago, you have got to make sure that all of this stuff, because this is historical record. Right. And it's true. It is. But you don't have to, everybody's life. I can come upon letters of just Joe Schmo, and I'm fascinated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
and we're lucky they're around. So
and you know what? If all of this makes you think, I think I'm gonna sit down and write a letter, you could give someone such a thrill. Yeah. Unless the reaction is, oh no, what do I have to write back?
Yeah. But most of us only find junk mail. Yeah, most of us find junk mail exclusively we don't even get bills that way. And so writing a loved one in your own handwriting, I think, means more. It almost makes time feel like it stops. So I highly recommend that everyone who's listening sit down and write someone they love a letter, or maybe write yourself a letter. We didn't talk at all about that, but
what? Write yourself a letter? I'm going to sit down and write myself a letter.
Exactly. Cole Porter. Exactly.
Is that what it is? And make believe it came from you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that Cole Porter? Oh, how wonderful.
It is.
God bless him. Well, so,
Yeah.
I have to tell you, Jennifer, I mean, I don't know if you expected me to talk to you for a full hour, but I just, this has been such a, it's been fun for me. And brings up a lot of stuff, doesn't it?
It does. And, you're great to talk to. And it's just an honor and a privilege to be able to speak with you. And as I said, my mom has been almost a fan for forever, for as long as I can remember. So I'm going to have to say hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Yeah, hi, Mom. And again, if you want to get the book, it's Finding Our Perfect Moon. Yes. Jennifer Adams, the author, and she is also, we should say, I don't know if I said, you might have said, you're a professor at DePauw
University in Indiana. Yes. Yes.
You can't get out of Indiana, Jennifer. I know.
I'm kind of trying right now. We'll see.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, guys, seriously, write a letter. Write something. Jeez. Teach a kid to write cursive. Oh, man, it's hard. I want to tell you something, my 100-year, I think this is why my mother's 101. She said to me, I was talking to her last night. We had a very funny conversation, rollicking, laughing a lot. But I was saying that I had a good time almost at a funeral, which seems not right. And I said, it was just so nice seeing so many different people that I had sitting and talking. And then I felt bad that I actually was enjoying myself. And she said, exactly. I want to make sure I have it. Hang on. Because I wrote it down. Because this is why she's 101. And how the hell she begot a melancholy soul like me, I don't know. But she said, it's never wrong to have a good time. I'm going to leave you with that. It doesn't hold up if you really start going at it. But that is her. I said, Mom, that's going on the tombstone. That's you. It's never wrong to have a good time. Those are words of wisdom from my mom for you. And I'll be back tomorrow. And I guess we'll get back into the real world. Well, we were still in the real world, weren't we? And anyway, toodaloo.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.